I found my daughter lying unconscious on a hospital bed, her face wrapped in bandages and tubes running through her arms like vines choking a dying tree. The doctors said it was a hit-and-run accident on Route 47, but I knew better. With trembling lips, she had managed to whisper 4 words before losing consciousness again. "Dad, it was her." Mrs. Harrington said daughters of mechanics don't deserve to build empires. The fury that rose in my chest was unlike anything I had felt since the day I buried my wife 20 years ago. Victoria Harrington had tried to destroy my daughter's dreams and nearly taken her life. She had hurt my little girl. Now I would tear her world apart, piece by piece. Have you ever stood up against someone who thought their money made them untouchable? Comment below and tell me what state you're watching from. I'd love to hear your stories of fighting back against those who tried to crush you. The call came at 6 in the morning on a Tuesday, just as I was finishing my 3rd cup of coffee before heading to the shop. A voice I didn't recognize told me my daughter had been found on the side of the highway. Her car flipped into a ditch. When they said Emily's name, the mug slipped from my fingers and shattered against the concrete floor of my garage. I drove faster than my old Chevy had ever gone, my heart pounding so hard I could hear it over the engine. Willow Creek, Tennessee, had always been a quiet town where folks waved at each other on Main Street, and the biggest excitement was the annual barbecue competition at the county fair. November mornings like this one usually smelled of pine trees and fresh coffee from Dolly's Diner. Instead, I was racing towards St. Joseph's Hospital, with tears blurring my vision. Emily had always been different from other kids. While her classmates spent their summers at the lake, she was in our garage learning how to rebuild engines and teaching herself to code on an old laptop I'd bought from a pawn shop. Her mother, God rest her soul, used to say Emily had fire in her heart and lightning in her brain. Margaret had been gone for 2 decades now, but I could still hear her voice saying, "That girl is going to change the world someday, Thomas. You just wait and see." When Emily finally opened her eyes 3 days later, the pain I saw there went far beyond the broken ribs and fractured arm. It cut straight through to my soul. "Dad." Her voice was barely audible, scratchy from the breathing tube they'd removed that morning. "I need to tell you something." "I'm here, sweetheart." "You're safe now." I squeezed her hand as gently as I could, mindful of the IV needle. It wasn't an accident. She struggled to focus, the painkillers making her drift. There was a black SUV. It forced me off the road on purpose. I saw the driver's face right before I lost control. My blood pressure spiked. Who was it? One of Mrs. Harrington's people. I recognized him from her office. Emily's eyes filled with tears. She wanted my app, Dad. MedConnect. She offered me $200,000 for everything. The code, the patents, the user data. When I refused, she got this look in her eyes. Cold. Like I was an insect she was about to crush. I felt my jaw tighten. Victoria Harrington was Willow Creek's version of royalty. She owned Harrington Medical Group, the largest healthcare network in eastern Tennessee. She sat on every hospital board, donated to every charity, and had more connections than a telephone switchboard. But I never imagined she was capable of attempted murder. "What exactly did she say when you refused?" Emily looked away, her jaw trembling. She laughed at me. "Dad," said I was a foolish girl playing at business. That daughters of grease monkeys don't get to build healthcare empires. A tear slipped down her bruised cheek. She said people like us should be grateful when our betters offer opportunities, and that if I was smart, I'd take the money and go back to whatever hole I crawled out of. Those words hit me like a sledgehammer to the chest. In that moment, I realized this wasn't just about Emily's app or Victoria's greed. This was about dignity, respect, and the God-given right of every American to pursue their dreams regardless of their bank account. Emily grabbed my arm with surprising strength. "Dad, I think we're in more danger than you realize." She said something else before I left her office. She said nobody refuses Victoria Harrington and walks away unscathed. Nobody. The drive home felt like it took hours instead of 15 minutes. Emily's warning echoed in my mind with every turn of the wheel. Once I got back to our little house on Maple Avenue, I sat at the kitchen table where Margaret used to spread out her sewing patterns and where Emily had built her first computer at age 12. I needed to understand exactly what we were dealing with. The next morning, I drove to Knoxville to visit my older brother, Frank. He'd spent 35 years as a homicide detective before retiring to a cabin outside the city. If anyone could help me navigate this mess, It was him. Frank listened without interruption as I laid out the whole story. Emily's app that connected rural patients with specialists through video consultations. Victoria's insulting offer. The hit and run that was clearly no accident. When I finished, he leaned back in his rocking chair and studied me with those sharp gray eyes that had interrogated hundreds of criminals. This isn't just a greedy businesswoman, Thomas. Frank's voice carried the weight of experience. This is a predator. People like Victoria Harrington don't get where they are by playing fair. They get there by eliminating anyone who threatens their empire. He opened his laptop, surprising me since I still thought of him as the brother who couldn't program a VCR. I still have contacts in law enforcement. Let me do some digging on your Mrs. Harrington. For the next 2 hours, we watched Frank work his network. Phone calls to old colleagues, searches through public records, cross-referencing business deals with suspicious incidents. The picture that emerged made my stomach turn. Look at this pattern, Frank said, turning the screen toward me. Over the past 12 years, at least 5 small healthcare companies in this region have had owners who experienced sudden misfortunes after refusing to sell to Harrington Medical Group. He clicked through old newspaper articles. A telemedicine startup founder who died in a house fire 6 weeks after rejecting Harrington's acquisition offer. A pharmacy chain owner who had a stroke at 42 right after his family refused to sell their stores. A medical software developer who supposedly committed suicide, leaving behind a note about overwhelming debt that his widow insisted he never had. This woman doesn't just acquire businesses, Frank said grimly. She eliminates obstacles. And right now, your daughter is her biggest obstacle. The kitchen fell silent except for the ticking of Margaret's old grandfather clock. I felt like I was seeing Victoria Harrington clearly for the first time, not just as an arrogant rich woman, but as something far more dangerous. So what do we do? I asked, my voice steadier than I felt. Frank closed the laptop. We need concrete evidence of her crimes, and we need someone who knows her operations from the inside. Someone close enough to... My phone rang, cutting through the tension. We both froze. That might be our answer, Frank said quietly. The voice on the other end was soft, trembling, and unmistakably male. Mr. Dawson, this is Marcus Harrington, Victoria's son. I need to speak with you urgently. It's about what my mother did to your daughter. Frank raised an eyebrow, but I could see the wheels turning in his detective mind. This was exactly the inside connection we needed. Where would you like to meet? I asked carefully. Grace Baptist Church on Old Mill Road. Tomorrow at noon. Please, Mr. Dawson. I can't live with myself knowing what she's done. And she's not finished yet. The line went dead. Could be a trap, Frank warned. No, I said, remembering what Emily had told me about Marcus. They'd been friends in college before she knew who his mother was. Emily always said he was different from his family. Kind. Decent. If he's reaching out, it's because he genuinely wants to help. The next day, I found myself walking through the doors of Grace Baptist Church, where Margaret and I had been married 43 years ago. The November afternoon was gray and cold, dead leaves skittering across the parking lot as I made my way inside. Marcus was already there, sitting in the last pew. He looked nothing like I'd expected. No expensive suit or arrogant posture. Just a young man in his early 30s with tired eyes and the weight of the world on his shoulders. Mr. Dawson, thank you for coming. His voice was steady, but I could see guilt eating at him. I need you to know that I had no idea what my mother was planning. When I heard about Emily's accident, I knew immediately it wasn't random. I sat down on the pew, leaving space between us. Tell me what you know, son. Marcus took a shaky breath. Growing up, I always wondered about my mother's business dealings. Competitors would suddenly decide to sell their companies. People who opposed her would have unexpected accidents or health problems. I told myself it was coincidence. That successful people always have enemies who spread rumors. He turned to face me directly. But after what happened to Emily, I started paying attention. Really paying attention. Listening to phone calls. Checking her private files. His voice dropped lower. Mr. Dawson, my mother isn't just a businesswoman. She's been destroying anyone who gets in her way for over a decade. The fire that killed Dr. Patterson. The stroke that disabled Mr. Yamamoto. The suicide that wasn't really a suicide. The pain in his voice was genuine. I found myself believing every word. Why are you telling me this? I asked gently. Because Emily was kind to me when we were in college. She didn't care that I was a Harrington. She saw me as a person. Marcus's eyes glistened. And because I can't stand by and watch my mother hurt more innocent people, I've been complicit through my silence for too long. He reached into his jacket and pulled out a USB drive. This contains copies of my mother's private financial records, payments to people she calls contractors, correspondence with associates who handle her problems, evidence that would put her away for the rest of her life. My heart started racing. This could be exactly what we needed. There's more, Marcus continued. She keeps physical files in a safe at her lake house, documents she'd never trust to a computer, including a folder labeled Dawson that she started the day Emily refused her offer. He stood up, checking his watch nervously. She's planning something else, Mr. Dawson. I heard her on the phone last night talking about finishing what was started, about making sure Emily's app never sees the light of day, no matter what it takes. When? Soon. Within the week. We need to act fast. The plan came together over the next 3 days. Marcus would access his mother's lake house during her annual charity gala at the Knoxville Grand Hotel. Frank had contacted his old partner at the FBI, an agent named Patricia Chen who had been investigating healthcare fraud in the region. Everything Victoria said and did would be monitored and recorded. The night of the gala, I sat in Frank's truck outside the hotel, watching the parade of expensive cars dropping off Tennessee's elite. Through an earpiece, I could hear Marcus navigating the lake house 30 miles away. "I'm at the safe," Marcus whispered, opening it now. My hands were sweating despite the cold November air. Oh my God. Marcus's voice changed, tight with horror. There's so much more here than I thought. Files on at least a dozen people, before and after photos. Medical records that look like they've been falsified. A folder labeled Solutions with names and dates going back 15 years. Frank and I exchanged grim looks. The pattern of death and destruction was worse than we'd imagined. I'm photographing everything, copying files to the backup drive. For the next 40 minutes, we listened as Marcus documented years of his mother's crimes. The picture that emerged was one of systematic elimination of anyone who stood between Victoria Harrington and what she wanted. "There's a folder here with Emily's name on it," Marcus said, his voice barely above a whisper. "Inside are photos of your house, your daily schedule, Emily's hospital room number, notes about the security guard's shift changes." My blood turned to ice. "And there's a contract dated 2 days ago. She's hired someone to finish the job. Someone who's supposed to make it look like Emily died from complications of her injuries." Before I could respond, we heard the sound of a car engine approaching the lake house. "Someone's here," Marcus said, panic rising in his voice. "That's impossible. Mother's gala doesn't end until midnight." Through the phone, we heard a door slam, footsteps on gravel. "Marcus, get out of there now," Frank ordered. "I can't. The only exit is past the driveway. They'll see me." The front door of the lake house opened. Victoria Harrington's cold voice echoed through our earpiece. "I knew you'd eventually show your true colors, Marcus. A mother always knows when her child is about to betray her." The situation had gone from controlled to catastrophic in seconds. But what Victoria didn't know was that everything she was about to say would be recorded. "You've made a terrible mistake coming here," Victoria continued. "Whatever you think you've found, it won't matter. No one crosses me and walks away. Not Emily Dawson. Not even my own son. Mother, please." Marcus's voice trembled. "What you're doing is wrong. These people you've hurt, the lives you've destroyed, were necessary casualties of progress," Victoria interrupted. "This is how empires are built, Marcus. The weak make way for the strong. That mechanic's daughter thought she could challenge me with her little app? She's lucky I decided to deal with her quickly instead of making her suffer first." Frank was already on the phone with Agent Chen as Victoria continued her confession, apparently believing she was alone with her son. The Patterson fire, the Yamamoto stroke, the Chen suicide, all carefully arranged, all necessary, and all completely untraceable. Victoria's laugh was like ice cracking. "That's the beauty of power, Marcus. When you have enough of it, you can do anything." "And Emily?" Marcus asked, his voice steadier now. "What about her? The hit and run should have been enough. Clearly I need to hire more competent help." Victoria's heels clicked on the hardwood floor. "But it doesn't matter. By this time next week, Emily Dawson will have a tragic relapse. Her father will be too consumed with grief to pursue anything. And MedConnect will become part of Harrington Medical Group, just as it was always meant to be. You're a monster, Marcus said quietly. I'm a survivor. There's a difference. Victoria's voice hardened. Now give me whatever you've copied, and we'll discuss how to repair the damage you've done to this family. The lake house door burst open. The sound of shouting and running footsteps filled our earpiece, followed by Agent Chen's commanding voice. FBI! Victoria, Harrington. You're under arrest for conspiracy to commit murder, attempted murder, and racketeering. Everything you've said has been recorded. I finally allowed myself to breathe. Victoria's screams of protest faded as agents swarmed the property. Through it all, I heard Marcus's shaky voice. It's over, Mr. Dawson. It's finally over. But it wasn't quite over. Not yet. 2 hours later, I stood in St. Joseph's hospital room, watching Emily sleep peacefully for the first time since the accident. Armed guards now stood outside her door, and Agent Chen had personally assured me that the contractor Victoria hired had been arrested trying to board a flight to Mexico. Frank put his hand on my shoulder. You did good, Thomas. Margaret would be proud. I thought about my wife then, about the faith she'd always had that good would triumph over evil, that ordinary people, bound together by love and determination, could overcome any darkness. We didn't do it alone, I said quietly. God put the right people in our path. Marcus, Agent Chen, even that nurse who noticed the suspicious man asking questions about Emily's room last week. Frank nodded. The Lord works in mysterious ways. 4 months later, I sat in the Nashville Federal Courthouse watching justice close its books on Victoria Harrington. The woman who had once seemed untouchable stood in an orange prison jumpsuit as Judge Williams delivered her sentence. Life imprisonment without the possibility of parole for conspiracy to commit murder, plus 40 additional years for racketeering, fraud, and criminal enterprise. The gavel's bang echoed through the packed courtroom. Beside me, Emily squeezed my hand, her arm now free of its cast. On her other side sat Marcus, who had become something more than just our ally over the past few months. It's really over, Dad, Emily whispered. And for the first time since that terrible morning phone call, I believed her. 6 weeks later, I found myself standing in the backyard of our house on Maple Avenue, watching Emily adjust the flowers in her hair for the third time. The March afternoon was warm with early spring sunshine and the smell of Margaret's roses blooming for the first time since we'd replanted them. You nervous, sweetheart? Terrified, she admitted with a grin, but the good kind of terrified. Marcus appeared in the doorway of our little house, wearing a simple gray suit. He looked nothing like the haunted young man I'd met in that church pew. The weight was gone from his shoulders, replaced by something I recognized from my own wedding day. Pure hope. He had legally changed his name, denouncing the Harrington legacy and everything it represented. He worked now at a non-profit clinic in downtown Nashville, using his business degree to actually help people instead of exploit them. Pastor Williams from Grace Baptist Church performed the ceremony in our modest backyard, past the same garage where Emily had built her first computer and developed the app that had nearly cost her everything, but ultimately saved countless lives. MedConnect had been successfully launched, and was now connecting rural patients across Appalachia with specialists they could never have afforded to see in person. Emily had refused several corporate buyout offers, choosing instead to keep the company small and mission-focused. But more than the success, it was the knowledge that her work was genuinely helping people that made Emily's eyes shine. I promise to stand by you, Marcus said, his voice clear and strong, to choose integrity over wealth, truth over convenience, and love over everything my family used to represent. Emily's response brought tears to my eyes. I promise to build our future together, one honest day at a time, to remember that real success isn't measured in dollars but in the lives we touch and the good we do. After the ceremony, as neighbors and friends celebrated in our backyard, I found myself standing by Margaret's rose garden, thinking about the journey that had brought us here. Victoria Harrington would spend the rest of her life behind bars. The families of her victims had finally received closure and substantial settlements from the Harrington estate. Marcus and Jasper, Victoria's former assistant who had also cooperated with authorities, were both rebuilding their lives with clean consciences. Even in the darkest circumstances, I had learned, redemption was always possible. As the sun set over Willow Creek, Emily and Marcus cut their wedding cake. A simple vanilla creation from Dolly's Diner downtown, the same place where Margaret used to buy my birthday cakes. Nothing fancy, nothing expensive, but made with love by people who cared about their community. "Dad," Emily said, pulling me aside as the evening wound down, "Marcus and I have some news. We're expecting a baby in October." I felt my heart expand with a joy I hadn't experienced since the day Emily was born. A new generation, a fresh start, a chance to pass on the values that had carried our family through its darkest hour. That night, as I sat on the front porch watching the stars emerge over our quiet street, I whispered a prayer of gratitude to Margaret, to my father, and to the God who ensures that love ultimately triumphs over hate, that justice eventually overcomes corruption, and that hope always finds a way to bloom, even in the hardest soil. Looking back on everything that happened to our family, I realized this wasn't just about protecting Emily's invention or standing up to a powerful woman. This was about something much deeper, the eternal struggle between good and evil, between those who use their power to lift others up and those who use it to tear others down. God puts people in our path for a reason. Marcus found his conscience when it mattered most. Agent Chen was investigating the right cases at exactly the right time. Even Frank's old contacts became instruments of justice when we needed them most. The Lord teaches us that no weapon formed against the righteous shall prosper. And our story proves that truth. When Victoria Harrington thought she had all the power, when she believed money and connections made her untouchable, God was already preparing her downfall through the very people she thought she controlled. If there's one lesson I want to pass on from this grandpa story, it's this. Never let anyone convince you that your dreams don't matter because of where you come from. Emily's app didn't become valuable because a rich woman wanted to steal it. It was always valuable because it came from a good heart and a brilliant mind determined to help others. This true story taught our family that ordinary people can accomplish extraordinary things when they stand together. We learned that courage isn't the absence of fear. It's doing what's right despite being terrified. Most importantly, we discovered that love, faith, and determination can overcome any obstacle, no matter how powerful your enemies might seem. Sometimes, the most important grandpa stories aren't about fairy tales or distant heroes. They're about real families who refuse to give up when everything seems hopeless. Our true story shows that with God's guidance, family love, and unwavering principles, even the smallest David can defeat the mightiest Goliath. As I watch Emily and Marcus prepare for parenthood, teaching their future children the same values Margaret and I tried to instill, I'm reminded that every generation faces its own battles between right and wrong. But with faith in our hearts and family by our side, good will always find a way to triumph. What did you think of our family's journey? Have you ever faced a situation where you had to choose between what's easy and what's right? Share your thoughts in the comments below. I'd love to hear your own stories of standing up for what matters. And if this story touched your heart, please subscribe to our channel and share it with someone who might need to hear that hope and justice still exist in this world.